Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Storytime with Jester. Today, I'll be reading from my personal book, the Book of Prophecies. But it's going to be a little bit different today. Not only will I be reading from the chapter, but also there's going to be an interactive video in the midst. So sit back, enjoy, and here we go. It's Chapter 13, An Unlikely Trio. The Shady Dragon Inn was bustling with patrons when Andor entered and made his way to the trestle. The heat of the high summer day had taken its toll on him, and he was ready to quench his thirst with some of Oswald's finest. As he was about to hail his busy friend, Hawkeye appeared beside him and beat him to it. "Oswald, another round for me and my friends," he said. Then, noticing Andor, "And one for Andor here as well." Oswald, visibly frustrated, said, "You do have a wench serving you. Why must you bother me?" "Aye, we do, and a cute lass she is," Hawkeye replied as he gave Andor a wink and sly grin. "But our thirst is mightier than our patience." Oswald returned with 7 mugs of ale, placing one in front of Andor and the other 6 in front of Hawkeye. "Here's 2 for each of you. Now be gone." Hawkeye grabbed up the brew and made his way over to the table where Xavier and Devon were. "That be an unlikely trio," Oswald said, nodding in their direction. "Aye, they are indeed," Andor agreed. Oswald returned to his duties, leaving his friend with the ale. After a couple of hours, and many an ale, the patrons dwindled to just a few. It was then that Oswald poured himself an ale and joined his friend at the trestle. "I know none of you have spoken much of your time away from us this past season," Oswald said, "and I've seen the scars on the wrists of the lot of you. I was hoping you'd shed some light on what happened, if you're able." With the mention of the scars, Andor grasped one of his wrists and stroked it as if remembering something painful. "You know, this past spring when we went to the coast to celebrate the feast of St. John?" Andor asked. Oswald nodded in remembrance, so Andor continued. "Shortly after the feast was over, the manor we were staying at was attacked by pirates. In our effort to track them down, we were captured. I was knocked unconscious, and when I awoke, I was aboard a slave ship, shackled at the wrists and ankles. All of my equipment and possessions had been stripped, and I was thrown in the hold with the rest of the slaves and forced to row. For 2 months we were aboard that cursed ship. May a cudgel strike swiftly on the head of the captain and crew. One day when the ship was offloading cargo, we managed to escape. Within a couple of days, we found shelter. But having been stripped of everything we owned when we were captured, we had to obtain jobs just to survive. The city we found ourselves in was a breeding ground for thugs, cutthroats, and other miscreants, and the like, who would just as soon kill us as talk to us. Most of us found work chopping wood, digging graves, cleaning stables, and the like. Joven was able to find a job with a teamster, and Hawkeye, well, Hawkeye was Hawkeye." The streets of Hedby were a filthy and disgusting crowded place, common in humanoid-ruled towns. Much trade passed through here, being loaded and unloaded on the many ships that made Hedby one of their ports of call. Having come from the hold of Marladron, Xavier was used to seeing slaves being sold in the blocks in open markets, but having just narrowly escaped such a fate himself in the time spent rowing on the slave ship, he saw this affair in a much different light. To everyone's surprise, when looking for jobs, Xavier chose the occupation of gravedigger. It hadn't appeared that he had ever done any menial labor in his entire life, and to look at his hands, that was a fair assumption. Yet there he was, laboring in the heat of the day, shovel in hand, digging the grave of some poor sot who either lost his life in some act of violence, or from the beating or lashing he suffered at the hands of his taskmaster. It was the latter in which, while their bodies were being deposited in the hole he just created, he lingered for a while before proceeding to the next. Hawkeye had found a discarded jester's outfit in a pile of clothes that accumulated from that of the deceased. After trying it on for size, he found that it fit rather well. He then rummaged through the wood remnants of old coffins until he found a couple of sticks roughly 3 feet in length. One he carved into a makeshift sword. The other he decorated with baubles he found on the street and topped it off with a ball of golden cloth. He then found a mishmash of old colorful rags. He convinced Kelwyn to don them and told him of his plan. The two of them hung out near the tavern district and awaited the wenches. Devon, for lack of finding suitable labor, dressed in rags and sat against a nearby building begging for alms, everyone thinking him to be a blind beggar. As the wenches walked by on their way to and from the taverns and inns, Hawkeye sprang into action.